A trip to my family's crowded, noisy, and bustling farmhouse in remote eastern Iowa during the holidays. This is a required gauntlet through which any new conscripts, significant others say, must run. Scarier than that, though, are the games. Charades, for example, is a violent ritual here. My first serious girlfriend was brought to tears when the clue she drew shortly after meeting my extended family, expectant eyes cast upon her, was the Broadway musical Urinetown. A life of games in my family is not much easier for us blood members. Our destruction by our own kin, even when we were young children, over the chessboard or at the poker table, for money and for keeps, was de rigueur. How else, after all, were we ever going to learn? But this is how you prove your bona fides in my family. This is your adoption ceremony or your christening. Games are how we come together. I remember, for example, the first board on which I ever played chess. It was in that farmhouse, indeed, in a corner of the charades room, an irregular and heavy slab of walnut onto which green squares of felt had been carefully glued by hand. It was a homemade Christmas gift from my mother's siblings to their father, my grandfather Jack. The pieces, ebony and ivory, were bought by my grandparents on their honeymoon to Mexico in 1949, their purchase being a primary goal of the journey. After hosting decades of battle, the squares of felt curled up at their corners. As a child, I spent every summer on the farm, jumping on hay bales and swimming and playing game after game of chess in the late afternoon light. Grandpa Jack was a strong player, wielder of a conservative and positional style. And as a matter of strict principle, of course, he never let kids win. Therefore, every chess player in my family has a cherished memory of their first victory, just as they will also eventually have a cherished memory of their wedding, say, or the birth of their child. When I finally beat Grandpa around age 9, after exhaustive practice and study, I ran into the kitchen to tell Grandma Shirley, who hugged me and who was, to borrow her word, tickled. I had arrived. Other games were tucked around every corner in that remote farmhouse. Playing cards and Hoyle's guides filled this drawer, checkers and marbles filled that one. In the shed outside, ring toss, croquet. Lining overstuffed shelves in the den were volumes on chess and cards and backgammon and horse race handicapping. Stacked in the dining room was a pile of crossword puzzle dictionaries, and on and on and on. Absolutely none of this was frivolous. Each game was the object of a sort of rotating, worshipful devotion. Each game would have its own fleeting turns on the dining table as the most important thing in the world. Little coliseums of play that united siblings, cousins, aunts and uncles, grandparents, and grandchildren. And important they are. There is, for example, little more democratizing a force than a crossword puzzle dictionary. Flipping through one, you are exposed to nearly every concept and city and celebrity in the world, each presented on equal terms. These things are a serious business for us. They occupied our time and they shaped our worldviews. Around the corner from the kitchen is the board games closet, more seriousness here still. The catalog of which, some 30 years removed from childhood, I can still rattle off. Stratego, Twixt, Clue, Probe, Kerplunk, Candyland, Battleship, Battling Tops, Masterpiece, Mastermind, and that's not to mention the card games in regular rotation. Euchre, Pinochle, Cribbage, Hearts, Gin, and something called Egyptian Rat Screw. In this closet, too, one finds democracy, the stuff of equality and opportunity and connection. Stratego, for example, places you in charge of a vast Napoleonic legion, a chance not often given to young cousins who can't yet drive. Even Candyland was heady stuff, as we cousins, of course, learned early on to secretly mark the cards. Let me also try another pitch for games' importance. Games are art, not in a grandiose sense, but in a literal sense. While painting captures the visual world and music captures the oral world, games capture human agency, deliberation and decision and action. And so the farmhouse was a sort of museum for my family, full of the art of games. It was the central institution that held us all together, and it remains so. Games are also practice, simple, crystallized models of the dauntingly complex world outside. We engage seriously with games, and so we engage seriously with the real world. But it has always been that chessboard that held the most potent allure for me, and that holds the most acute Proustian resonance for me today. I remember the weathered board and the battered pieces and the games against Grandpa Jack. By the time I arrived, a few of the knights, after having been captured surely thousands of times by various members of my family, had lost their heads. They were precariously and often reattached with superglue. I associate superglue and chess to this day. The other pieces I thought had a look of terror in their eyes. I remember clearly the sharp spikes on the rims of the queen's crowns and the neat crenellated battlements of the rooks. I remember the clunk of the dense pieces on wood. Chess was invented some 1,500 years ago. Other games, Go and backgammon, are older still. The same games found in ancient burial tombs, in ruined cities and lost empires are found in that closet in the little farmhouse in eastern Iowa. When it comes to cultural artifacts, not much rivals the longevity of games, nor when it comes to connective tissue. Games are a spider's web that connect us through chronology and across geography. Perhaps we've both seen Winged Victory in the Louvre or Water Lilies at MoMA. Those shared experiences connect us. And we've certainly both played chess, and that connects us too. As I prepared this story, I realized that games are not the cause of my family's closeness, but rather a reflection of it, and a ratchet that tightened us. The worn and beloved chessboard, fraying apart at the seams but still in active use, is evidence of this. When we play, we are together in a nested set of places, in this game, in this farmhouse, in this family, in the wider world. Grandpa died when I was 14. Of course, we kept playing on the chessboard with the broken knights. And the same books that line the shelves of his den, on chess and cards and horses, now line mine. Games stuck with me. I played the tournament Scrabble scene for years and semi-professional poker. I studied game theory, analyzing the rich and arcane mathematics that underlied my family's pursuits. And I recently wrote my own book about games, a project that brought me all around the continent reporting. And while I was alone on these trips, the links to my family were never far away. My book is dedicated to Grandma Shirley, who died 2 years ago. In memory, Shirley Tabor, who taught me to play. During the pandemic, perhaps more games have been played than at any time in human history. The spider web of games spun out around the globe, binding us in its messy, lovely network. Games became solace. We arrived in search of art and of agency, to flex muscles that were atrophying, and, of course, to come together. Last week, I Zoomed with my eldest cousin. We played games while we Zoomed, of course, backgammon online for $1 a point, and we talked about the chess pieces at the farmhouse. I told him I was going to tell a story about them tonight, about coming together, about playing chess with Grandpa Jack, and about how the knights' heads would always fall off and had to be superglued back together. My cousin told me he had recently inherited the chess pieces from the farmhouse. He planned to use them to teach chess to his daughters. He just finished up in his workshop, he said. He installed in each night a small metal spine, and he screwed their heads on tight. Thank you.